Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on our webinar on 7 tips for motivating middle school and high school kids during distance learning. My name is Dan Tew, and I'll be kicking us off today, as well as moderating our Q&A portion of today's segment. Before we get started, there's a couple of announcements I'd like to make. First of all, this webinar is being recorded, and you will automatically be emailed a copy of it. As well, we'll be posting this online and available for your review at your convenience, so don't worry if you miss anything or if you want to go back and watch something. Secondly, we're really excited to announce for the first time that we're making this webinar available in Spanish captioning. So if you want, you can go to this bit.ly URL. It's also being entered in our chat box right now, so you can click to that. And the way you'll see it is don't close out of this webinar. You'll still be watching this webinar, and that link will take you to a captioning site where you'll see the translations as we speak, or as close as possible as when we speak. And we'd also like to thank several organizations who've really helped us with philanthropic support, which has enabled us to bring you programming like today's session. So we want to give a special thanks to AT&T, Bank of America, Google.org, Fastly, and Novartis. With that, I'd like to introduce you all to Kristen DeSerbo, who will be walking through the tips and answering your live questions. Kristen's our amazing Chief Learning Officer. She's also an expert in learning science, and she's going to be sharing all of her expertise with you today. So with that, take it away, Kristen.
Great, thanks, Dan, and welcome to all of you. Thanks so much for joining. I know that raising teenagers is difficult. So one of the big jobs of a teenager is to differentiate themselves from their parents and to think about who they are outside of their family. And that means that sometimes it's really hard to know what's going on with them, and they're trying on new identities and they're trying new things. So I'm not going to tell you that I have all the answers today, sorry, but hopefully I can provide some strategies that maybe you haven't thought of before, other things to try, ways that things you might give a chance to. There's nothing that's going to work for everyone. There's nothing that's going to work for every kid. But there's some things we can all think about trying, sharing, to make things a little bit easier for ourselves. So with that disclaimer, I'll start off. I'm going to go through the tips that are based on research and what we know, and then go and Dan will ask some of the questions that you guys are putting into the questions piece on the webinar, and we'll have some time for Q&A. So with that, when you take all of the research about motivation and think about, okay, what is the big thing? What are the big takeaways? It turns out that it's pretty simple. We're all motivated to do things when, one, we expect to be successful at them, and two, we value the activity. So this probably makes sense. Who wants to do things when they think they're going to fail at them or not be successful? And second, we want to do things that matter, that are important to us. Now, one of the tricks with teenagers is that the things they value are changing, and sometimes they're not communicating the things that they value anymore. And so that can make it difficult to think about how do you help them increase their perceived value of an activity, because it's not always clear. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about ways to use that lever of value, and also ways that we can help our students feel like they're going to be successful. So if we think about all of the rest of the tips that I'm going to give, they're pretty much based on doing one or both of these things. So if you keep that in your mind, even if these particular tips aren't working, you might think of other ways that you can help students be successful or help them really see value in the activities that they're being asked to do in school. So one of the biggest things that hits on both value and success is setting goals. And the reason it's related to success is because nothing makes you feel like you can be successful as having had some success in the past. So if you set some short-term goals and students are able to achieve those, they start to gain momentum. They start to see themselves as learners. And that can be really important just in changing the mindset. So think about for teenagers, for kind of middle school and high school students, You don't want to set a goal that's going to take longer than a week, because even at this age, more than a week is a long time to kind of be able to move through. So if you do want to set like your goal for the month or for the semester, you're going to want to break that up into pieces so that it's something that there's a tangible achievement pretty quickly. So you start to get that feeling of success and build that momentum. And the other piece you want to do is find ways to know if you're on track to meet that goal. So if you have a weekly goal, say we're going to try to read 3 chapters in this book by the end of the week, think about what does that break down to per day. Think about that's a way to monitor progress so that then they know, are they on track? Oh, I didn't quite read that many pages yesterday, so I'm going to read this many today. Or I'm going to read a few extra today, so I don't have to read as many tomorrow. Those kinds of conversations are important to help students build that muscle of being able to think about their own progress and whether they're on track or not. So we want to keep, when we're thinking about setting goals, we don't want to set too many. Keep them, a few, not more than 3. So think about short goals, a brief number of them, and goals that you can really measure so you know when you've met them. Which leads us to the next piece, celebrate success. So if students do meet their goal, you want to make sure that that's a big message that they're getting. Hey, you were successful. So that can be a variety of things. It can be your tone of voice when you're talking about it. It can be, high fives and hugs. It can be, choosing what's for dinner. We're going to talk more about tangible rewards a little bit later. But you're thinking about, ways to celebrate when students do meet their goals, and also take that as a time to reflect. So it's important when students are, and when they're not successful, to think about what were the things that helped them meet that goal? What did they do that helped them be successful? Or what were the obstacles that got in the way so that they weren't successful? And how can they think about what they might do differently next time, or what they're going to repeat next time to be able to have success? So that little bit of reflection can be really important for students too, to be able to get to that. And both with setting goals and reflecting, you want to bring the students in. You don't want to be, as a parent, setting the goal for them. You want to be working with them to set goals. It's also, when we're talking about school and learning, a good idea to connect with their teacher, to look at what their goals are that are already set out by their teachers are, so you can make sure that that's all in lockstep with where students need to be. So the other piece of reflection is thinking about what happened when they maybe ran into trouble or got stuck a little bit. And that relates to the third tip, is helping to manage roadblocks. So sometimes, particularly with distance learning, students will get to a place where they just don't know what to do next. So they're stuck and they don't know what to do. And then they get frustrated, and they get into this kind of emotional spiral with it. You want to think about managing roadblocks before they get to that point. So when you are talking about what are your goals for the week, that's the time to talk about, so what are you going to do when you get stuck? And they might even have, a little list of things that they can refer to. What to do when I get stuck? How do they get help from you if you're available when they're working on their work? I know lots of us are also working from home at the same time. So what are the indicators that you have of when it's okay to ask you for help, and hey, when you're on a call and it's not okay to ask for help? Like, be really specific about how to get help from you. How can they get help from their teacher? How can they find help online? How can they get help from their peers? So all of those things we should think about. What are the strategies that they have when they get stuck? Maybe one of the strategies is to walk away for a little bit and come back. That's a good strategy, especially when you start to feel frustrated. So think about how to manage those roadblocks before they get in the situation of needing to know what to do. From there, you want to think about emphasizing that effort leads to success. So remember, we talked about this idea of feeling like you'll be successful. But by early teens, lots of kids already have some perceptions of things they're just not good at. And we want to make sure and try to break those ideas that even when we are not maybe, quote, naturally good at something, if we keep practicing at it, we'll get better. And we actually have on the Khan Academy website a course called Growth Mindset. And in that, there are some pretty good videos that talk about, hey, not just saying, hey, keep trying, but the way our brains work. There are cells in our brains, we call them neurons. And when we learn something new, those neurons form new connections with each other. And so what practice does, and even practice when we're not succeeding, even practice that we're getting wrong, helps build those linkages. And it's almost like when you're lifting weights, and you can make this analogy that your brain is a muscle. And when you're lifting weights, sometimes it's a little too heavy and you can't quite lift that weight. But you go down a little bit and you practice at that, and it builds up your muscles. The same thing, you practice at those at that level that's a little bit hard for you, and your brain's going to make more connections. If you just practice, same with lifting weights, if you're just lifting the 2-pound weights and it's not really hard for you, well, you're probably not building your muscles. The same way, if you're just practicing stuff you already know that's super easy, you're not making those connections in your brain. So we find that in the research that when kids start to understand a little bit about, actually there's a biology basis for trying things and working on things that are kind of hard for you, that actually motivates them to think, oh, I can be successful. I can improve at this thing that I'm doing. So recommend checking out some of those videos, but also thinking about how to help your students see that things aren't always easy, and that learning actually is hard work. And that's okay, because if they put in the work, they're going to get better at it. So that's the fourth piece. The fifth one is to encourage curiosity. And this can be tough, in particular with teens and preteens, and thinking about, all of a sudden they're not interested in the same things they used to be interested in. And so it can take some work to try to figure out, what kinds of things are they interested in now? How do we help keep them thinking about, I wonder how the world works? So the ways, so one thing you can do is model that kind of thinking. Ask those questions out loud. Ask those things like, when you're riding your bike, why does pedaling the pedal move the big wheel? All of these kinds of things. How is this tree, it doesn't seem to be getting any food. How is it, continuing to grow? And what does that look like? So if you're asking those questions and modeling, being curious about the world, students will pick up on that. So they'll, oh, that is interesting. And they'll start to find things, and it won't be everything. And sometimes they'll roll their eyes, but as you keep trying and keep putting things out there, different things, and they'll start to kind of, oh, maybe that is interesting, or start to have a conversation about that, or start to build on that. So keep encouraging that sense of interest and curiosity in the world, because what this does is it increases that value piece that I was talking about. So if learning in school can help you understand the world and help you understand things you're curious about, then that's going to increase that value and make you more motivated to do the activities that you're doing related to school. So that piece, next piece is related to that, which is help establish relevance. So if you talk to teachers, they will almost always say, they hate the question when kids say, when will I ever need to learn this? But it turns out that when we, again, think of that value side of the equation, that thinking about how something is related to your interests, your goals, what you might want to be when you grow up, related to learning something else that you're interested in learning, all of those things increase the value of the activity and make students more likely to want to engage in it. So those are important pieces to think about. How do we establish that relevance? So this comes back to knowing what your kids' interests are, which can involve some detective work. It can involve you observing them. It can involve talking to them, all those conversations. Sometimes they're not going to want to talk, but that's okay. Keep going. Persistence on your part is important too. And they will recognize that. So thinking about how to establish what is relevant to your kids, you'll have to figure out what are their interests, what are their things that are important to them, to be able to help make those links. But you have a better chance of doing that than their teacher does. So the more you can do that, the better impact you're likely to have on their learning. So next, then finally, we talk a lot about rewards, and we get a lot of questions from parents like, "Is this bribing my kid?" I don't want to bribe them to do their work. They should want to do it. Those kinds of things. So a couple of pieces of guidance. One is we all use rewards. I know I use rewards for myself sometimes, and I think about when I have to do a lot of writing and it's kind of going slowly. I'll say if I just finish this page, I can give myself a Hershey's Kiss, like just a little piece of chocolate, not a big reward, but a little something that's a reward for doing it. We're not all intrinsically motivated to do everything all the time. Sometimes we need a little bit of boost. And so rewards are used and are best used when they're something that we can take and get students going on a path. So if it's something they don't have any interest in doing, a reward can be that little boost that gets them started. And once they get started, they can start to, again, experience some success. They can start to find out interesting things. They can start to see themselves as learners, but they need that little boost to get going. So rewards can definitely help do that. They also don't have to be tangible things. They can be like spending time with you. They can be spending time with their friends. They can be an extra half hour on the computer playing the game they're interested in. They can be picking the movie. It can be picking what's for dinner. All kinds of things can be rewarding that don't have to be a tangible something that is money related to cost and buying things. So think about using rewards to get things going, keep them small, help you can brainstorm with your kid about what things are rewarding to them. And that can be good to come up with a continuum of rewards. If your student says, yeah, a trip to Disney World, that can be on one end. It can go on the way bottom of the list, but I'm not going to encourage using those kinds of big rewards. They really are not effective because they require, hey, if you get A's all year, you can get this. It's just too long of a timeline and too big of a stakes. So you want to do small things. So if they don't get it, then that's okay because they'll have another chance, which is the final thing about using rewards, is it shouldn't be something they either earn or they have no chance of ever earning again. It should be okay if you didn't earn it this time, we can set a new goal and you can try to earn it again the next time. So you want to think about things that are are small and able to, if they don't make it the first time, are able to try again to earn those things. So those are some of the big tips and ideas for thinking about generally, again, thinking about this balance of how can we help kids think they'll be successful and how can we help them value the activities we're asking them to do. So I will stop and pause there, and Dan, ask you to give us some of the questions we heard.
Yeah, great. So thanks, Kristen. Before we get into the Q&A portion, a couple of reminders for folks. If you want a handout version of this in GoToWebinar, there's a handout section with a link to this PDF with these 7 tips. And then also, we are already getting a lot of great questions, but if you have any questions, please put them in the question box. There's a team of moderators kind of behind the scenes putting in all the questions and surfacing them up. So go ahead and start entering them right now. So Kristen, we already had a couple of questions come in, one from email from a couple of days ago. Question is from the person S. How do we get our older kids not to play games on their school issued devices without policing them constantly? It's a huge distraction and very difficult to control. We already have contacted the school several times about blocking some of these sites. It's still an issue. I mean, I would assume for younger kids, it's probably Minecraft. For middle kids, it's probably Fortnite, and then now it's the Among Us game, right? So there's all this constant distractions that are available for the kiddos.
Oh my gosh, I just saw the Congress people playing Among Us the other day. Wow, that was crazy. So there's a couple of things here, absolutely. One of the challenges of learning from home is that there are so many more distractions. And that it can be really difficult to think about, okay, how do we help kids focus? So there's a couple of ways to kind of attack this issue. One is, if I'm gonna keep hitting on this goals piece. If they have goals that are set so that this is what they need to achieve, then we want to work with them to make sure they're on track to do that. Then they'll think about, okay, if I'm doing this, does that get me off track to meet the thing that I need to do? I need to read 30 pages today. All right, can I read 15 and then play a little bit and then read 15 more? Like, have these kind of conversations with them about how they might still be able to play some, if the playing is allowed at all on the device. There's a couple of different ways this might be going. This question could be going, like, if the games are not allowed on the devices, you probably need to think about those technological solutions that block them. But if gaming's allowed, but they need to be doing their schoolwork, think about how you can potentially set up schedules that let them have some game time. Like, have a little bit of game time, have breaks. Breaks are good. We all need breaks. And then they need to come back from the break and think about continuing their school and their work and what those are. Those can be, good ways to think about teaching moderation. Think about teaching a little bit of that, kind of control of what they're doing. Set the timer for however, 15 minutes that they can play, and then come back to doing what they're doing. Can think about what that is. They've also told you, this is a really rewarding and interesting thing for me. So if you can think about how to use that as a reward and turn it into a reward, that that's something that they're probably going to work for, because that's where it is and how they're getting there. I'm going to, it probably any other kind of, punitive measures and all of that are not going to be that successful. It's more like turning up the dial on some of the schoolwork and letting them have the game, pieces of the game at different times when it's appropriate, and help them figure out how to make a schedule that fits into to help those work. So they can play a little bit.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I love the suggestion of turning it into part of the incentives piece. Kristen, we have a question from Nan who asks, it's related to the goal. So once after you've kind of figured out the goal, the question is, how do you convince the kid that achieving the goal will lead to success? A lot of the times the kids don't believe you.
So one thing is to set up meeting the goal itself is success. Like, if you're gonna, again, you're gonna try to do, 35 practice problems on factoring polynomials. That's like meeting that goal itself, like doing 35 practice problems on meeting polynomials. That is a success in itself. That's great. So you want to make that itself an endpoint for them. Like, that's really good that they've done that. So it's that piece that then makes them feel like, hey, so next week the math challenge is going to be, adding and subtracting polynomials, but now you already were successful at factoring them. So it's really likely that you're going to be successful at adding and subtracting them, because you already were successful once on this other thing that was pretty hard to learn, and you did it. So the key is to use kind of their past successes and their successes once they in themselves are a success, and then using those to build on those of why they're likely to be successful in future things.
That's great. That's great. Kristen, we have a question from Arlene, and the parent asks a question that I think a lot of us have experienced. One, I'm a parent of a high schooler and a middle school counselor. A lot of our students are struggling with depression and anxiety from being in the house since last March. They're not motivated and upset because they're failing. How can we motivate them when they're mostly upset from being in the house for 6+ months? I think it's just really important to recognize that that's pretty normal. I mean, I know that I've experienced a little bit of that too during these last 8 months.
Absolutely. So the first thing I'm going to say is that mental health is more important than school progress. So the first thing I would say is think about, as you said, Dan, some amount of just being mildly depressed and a little bit anxious is pretty normal in these kinds of times. If you're finding that it seems to be beyond a little bit, if it's really interfering with their interactions with your family, if it's really interfering with their just daily lives, like, they are not getting out of bed, those kinds of signs, I absolutely recommend professional help. Talk to your pediatrician is a good starting point. Make sure to, think about what are the signs of, someone who's needing for whom this is a little bit more than, oh, this is tough. So that's the first thing I would say, is know when to get help. There's a number, lots of good ways to check it, but what psychologists usually look for is when it starts to interfere with your daily life, as kind of a good rule of thumb for when it makes sense to get help. But if it is like less than that, and it's, hey, I just am sad today, I'm just feeling anxious today, all of those things. So first, as a parent, empathize, just like Dan just did. Hey, you know what? I get it. This situation is no fun. Like, all of us are struggling, and it is totally okay to struggle. I also encourage, the way this was written was being in the house. It does help if you're in a place, even if it's not with other people, to at least get some outside air, to go out and move and get some fresh air if that's possible where you live and in your weather and all of those kinds of things. The next piece is that exercise piece. Like, moving can be important and can help kids get up. So even if you're thinking about the school day, they should have breaks in their school day where they are getting up and moving and walking. And I'm saying this as do as I say, not as I do. I'm the worst. I've been sitting in my chair here for like 8 hours. But thinking about getting up and moving is okay. And making sure some of that's built in. And the final thing that teens really struggle with, I think, is the peer interaction and the reduced peer interaction they've had in these times. So if there are ways that you can help facilitate, whether that's online, video interactions, whether that's if you have, a small safe group. I know some people are doing, hey, there's 2 other families, then we all, have kind of the same view on what's acceptable in terms of safety, and we all get together. Finding some ways that kids can connect with other kids can be helpful too in these times that we found. So lots of different potential things, but empathize, definitely, talk to your kids about it. Try to keep those doors open so that they can talk to you when they have concerns.
That's great advice. Thanks, Kristen. We have a question from Barbara, who's asking advice for kids who strive for perfection, who are super motivated, but they are also, they kind of are worried about doing things that are imperfect, and that experience in itself overwhelms them. So how do you help those students? I think some of the compartmentalizing and making things more chunkable that you talked about earlier was super relevant for this type of case as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thinking about how to, think about what is done, what is acceptable for an assignment, what is okay. And the other piece is to really try to focus on learning as opposed to grades. So one of the things that often happens with kids who kind of have that perfectionist streak is they really start to focus on getting 100, or getting really that perfection piece. And what you want to try to do is to turn that focus to, what did you learn today? What are the new skills you have? What are the new ideas you understand? And asking, the more you can ask questions about those things and start to try to celebrate learning something new, or getting a new skill, or being able to do something you couldn't do before, and trying to get them to focus on that piece as opposed to the, what was your grade or score on this, can be helpful in reducing some of that perfection piece. And the other thing I would say is to, try to communicate that failure is okay, and failure is actually how we learn. That gets back to some of that that growth mindset communication, that it's okay to not be successful sometimes. That helps us learn. And trying to help kids be okay with that. And interestingly, for all the talk about games are actually pretty good at teaching that. That it's okay to fail, and you end up, you can get your lives back, you can start over. It's all okay, but kind of communicating about that idea can be important too for kids.
Great, Kristen. One question we have from Dennis, who's asking, remote learning is a big part of this year's curriculum. This allows for different routines in the day. Some days it's work from home, some days the kids can work, stay in their pajamas and take some classes. What advice would you have, or how much emphasis would you say in maintaining a consistent routine versus altering the routine?
Yeah, so good question. Kids generally do thrive on routine and knowing what to expect and what's going to come next. But that doesn't mean it has to be always the exact same thing. So what I would advise in terms of maintaining is maintaining a schedule. So at 9 o'clock this happens, at 10 o'clock this happens. That's written down is usually helpful with some visual cues so they can take a look at it and really reference, okay, here's what's coming next, here's what's coming up today for the rest of the day. And so if that part is maintained, like they know what's coming, then you can flex a little bit, like other things, like what are they wearing? It's okay if they're gonna think about, hey, and you can think even schools do this. If you remember back to when your kids were in elementary schools, they probably did, it's crazy hat day, it's pajama day. All of those things are good flexes to make in the routine, so it doesn't just become monotonous, and there's new things that they're doing. I will say, you also talked about classes lounging on the futon. I have mixed feelings about that. It's good if kids have a space to learn that's kind of signals to them mentally, I'm on now, because as we were talking about all those other distractions, if you're kind of trying to do school in the same place that you hang out and play video games at night, in the same place that you're watching movies, that's kind of not communicating, hey, now's the time I need to kind of tell my brain it's time to focus on schoolwork. So the more you can, in terms of the place, have some kind of a set place that is communicating to them, this is where the schoolwork happens, is probably a good idea. But one class lounging on the futon, one video isn't gonna hurt anyone.
I love that. I know for myself personally, I've been in this room for 8 months, and then I think once a month I decide to go to like the kitchen or the dining room and try to change things up just a little bit.
Yes, absolutely.
Kristen, we have a follow-up about the rewards and incentives. So Kiki asks, I've used Fortnite as a reward in the past, but they find that my son rushes through his work in order to quickly get to playing this game. So how do you get him to understand that it's not just the quantity, but actually the quality of the work that is important?
Yes, well, the reward has to be contingent on the quality. So the reward can't just be doing the 10 math problems. It has to be doing the 10 math problems and maybe explaining to you why they're right. So it's depending. I know some math problems, right now, there's probably some math problems I couldn't grade. Like I wouldn't know if they were right or wrong, and some pre-calculus problems and things. And so if it's the case where you actually aren't sure if they're right or wrong, have your student explain them to you and walk you through the steps. And if he can do that, then he can play. So it's definitely a matter of trying to set that goal for quality. If it's something that you can look at and see if he's met a quality standard, great. If not, have them explain it to you and see if they've met that kind of standard.
No, that's great. I think this is one challenge that I remember as a kid. You have to finish your homework before you get to do, play with your friends, and you would just go home and rush through your homework just to go play with your friends, right?
Absolutely. So there has to, I know this puts burden on parents to say you've got to check it a little bit, but if you're thinking about rewards, you kind of do, otherwise you're going to get those unintended consequences.
So Kristen, I think we have time for maybe one or two more. We have a really good question from Ranga. These recommendations require parents to constantly engage throughout the day. Otherwise, the children go back to playing, whatever they like. How are you kind of constantly engaged? I think this posits a question where I don't know if you do have to be constantly engaging. I think the assumption here is that you have to be kind of with your child the whole time. I think part of your recommendations that allows you to free up some of that time. So can you speak to how do you kind of balance the engagement and the time that as a parent you have to do your day job?
Yeah. So first, just let me recognize that it's absolutely, we're asking way too much of parents right now. We are asking them to do, multiple jobs and not giving any, break on the amount of time needed to do them. But I do think that what you want to do is think about how you can structure the day so that they have set things they're supposed to do at set times. And then you can do check-ins to see if they got those done. And so and again, you want to think about positive reinforcement. So you may have to start off with very small chunks, but over time you can gradually extend them. So if you're thinking about, at the beginning, you may need to say, okay, here's what we're going to do in the next hour. And if we get that done, then you set the goal for the next hour. So that would require like hourly check-ins. But over time, as they, start to again see, okay, what's our goal for the next 2 hours? And again, using rewards is not a bad thing. Think about how you can reward meeting those goals that you set for those short time periods and then lengthen them over time so that you don't have to check in so frequently and they're still getting that feeling of success and staying on task.
So I think we have time for one more, and we have a couple of questions around the same theme, which is from Linda and Annika. They're both wondering what ideas do you have for students who sees zero value in school, or if the kids' desire to fit in socially causes them to kind of digress academically.
Yeah, they're probably a bit separate, but so if your kid is really motivated by social things, you want to think about how to tie social things into learning, how to provide social learning experiences. Are there small study groups, even if the two kids are just on their computers and have the video on, but aren't studying together? There's just like some social interaction there. Can you think about, having then access to peers as something that's rewarding for them? So find ways to give them that social experience, but tie it into also learning goals and being able to learn together with their peers and what they're doing. So that's kind of the social piece. The other piece for kids who just don't see a value of school is that, the toughest thing about teenagers is probably for those who it's tough to figure out what they are interested in. But that's my advice, is to figure out what does interest them. What are the things that they value? What are the things that are interesting to them? Is it, working on old cars? Is it, baking? What is something that they like to do? And then think about how you can tie in things they're learning in school to that piece of things. I use baking a lot because it's easy to set up. There's a lot of math in baking, and you can, kind of make some of those ties in there. But there's the key is to think about what are the things that are interesting and trying to make those links, whether it's future careers, whether it's learning something that helps them be better at that thing that they're doing, relating their physics lessons to things that are going on, whatever that is that they're interested in. It can be tough to figure out. Sometimes teenagers can seem pretty apathetic about a lot of stuff and don't want to show their parents when they're interested in things. But again, put on your detective hat, so you can figure out what it is that they are interested in and start to try to build some of those bridges.
Yeah, oh, that's wonderful. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions today. And so, Kristen, thank you for sharing your expertise with our audience. And we want to thank you all you busy parents out there. We know it's an incredibly busy time and you're balancing a lot. So we want to thank you for joining our session today. A couple of reminders: if you missed anything or you want to review, by registering for this webinar, you'll automatically be emailed this recording. If you want to download the PDF as well, that'll automatically be sent to you. And we will also be posting this in YouTube afterwards as well. So you'll have multiple chances to go back and look at some of the content if you missed anything. And then secondly, we have a lot of resources available on our keeplearning.khanacademy.org microsite, which has all of our distance learning materials in one place. And then before we sign off, we want to ask you to do two things for us. First, there's a poll that will pop up, and we will be asking you, how could we make future iterations of this session more useful for you? And then secondly, we will ask you your advice on what kinds of sessions would you like to see us build on next. So please let us know. This was actually a result of some of your feedback in the past as well. And we're totally here to support you in any way we can. So from all of us at Khan Academy, thank you again for joining us, and have a great evening.